And we're back for another episode of the Double O Podcast, also known as the Double Oppa Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Young. Along with me is my other host, Drew. So last week, again, before we go anywhere, I guess, Drew, tell the audience a little bit about our podcast. Why should they listen in?
Yeah. So if you didn't tune in last week, you should definitely go back and listen. But last week we went over who Young is, his background, learned a little more about him, and really to just give you guys an idea as to why you should continue to tune into our podcast. Because if you don't know who we are, or at least have a good idea of what we're about, then we're not really giving you guys a reason to tune in. So today's episode, you'll learn a little more about me. And if you haven't watched the first episode, we are on all streaming services. So Spotify, YouTube, and at some point, Apple. For some reason, they won't let us create an account, but we'll get that figured out. So make sure you tune in.
Sounds good. Yep. Again, I'm a podcast listener through Apple Podcasts, so it pains me to say that we haven't figured that out yet, but we will sort that out. But before we jump into talking a little bit about you, Andrew, I know that recently you went to a music festival. I think a lot of people know at this point what Coachella is already. Personally, I've never been there, so I don't know what that's like. Obviously, I've heard of the festival. So tell us a little bit about your Coachella weekend.
Yeah. So for context, this is my fourth Coachella. And historically, Coachella, one of the like challenges, if you will, is just dealing with the weather. So it's like really, really hot and humid during the day. And then at night, it can get really, really cold. But this year, it wasn't like that. I think both during the day and at night, the weather was very bearable. So from that perspective, it was great. We had a house like basically right next to the venue. So we just had to like bike in and out, which was also super clutch because there's so many people at Coachella that getting into the festival, if you don't like have a bike or are super near the venue, can be a nightmare. And then leaving the venue after the show ends is an absolute nightmare. Um, Dude, like people were paying up to like $200-300 for an Uber. Like on top of that, you're waiting like hours just to leave the festival. So having bikes and then also having a house right next to the venue was so clutch. Like I'm talking like 7 minutes from the front door of our house to the venue. And man, it was a good time for sure. I went with one of probably my longest standing friends of like over 15 years at this point. And we had a small group. Like for me, I actually prefer smaller groups because, if the group is too large, it's kind of a headache to manage. And at festivals like this, people like to have a lot of fun. And when people like to have a lot of fun, you know, quote unquote things typically happen. So yeah, overall though, it was good. I'll pause there. It was a good experience.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things come up to my mind here. So at a festival this big, and I've been to like EDC,
Right.
and there's always, well, I don't know if it's rumors because I think I've seen this. Other than the performers, like people who can afford it tend to like get other modes of transportation. So is that the same thing in Coachella where like you could pay somebody a lot of money to like fly you in and out with choppers? I always wonder about that.
Dude, it probably is a thing. I personally just didn't see it, but at the same time, I was just GA with the other homies. And because like some like the biggest artists like in the world literally like perform or attend Coachella, like you know what I mean. So you would think that they would have some like private like escort service in and out of the festival. Um, I know one of the guys that we met up with. I don't want to say his name just because he's up there, but he had his own like private chauffeur like in and out of the festival for all 3 days. So like that's definitely a thing. Um, but yeah,
Also, like bodyguards.
not bodyguards, but like he had like a driver. So whenever like he would text him, he would just like immediately be right where he was at. Um, so I definitely saw a lot of that. Uh, but yeah, I'm sure there was a few helicopters or planes here and there. You know what I'm saying?
Just imagine if they dug up an underground tunnel.
Oh
You
my!
just like never see any of this action. You got
Hey,
tens
I
of
won't be
thousands
surprised.
of people walking up in the level, and you're
Jesus,
just casually walking underground. I don't know, narco style when they dug up
narcos.
the when they dug up those underground tunnels to cross the border.
Oh my
Hey,
god!
I mean, to be honest, there's nothing but field out there. So
And it makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
So we talked about biking in and out. Let's talk about the actual festival.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm sure you talk about small group. You guys probably had some idea of like who to go watch, and they nowadays they like what put up a little app on your phone, give
Hmm.
you a little agenda thing that you could like plan and schedule things around. So I'm sure you did some of that. Any artists or sets that come to mind?
Yeah. So I think my favorite set was Isonoc. So Isonoc is two DJs. So the first one is ISO XO, and then the second one is Knock 2. And what's cool about them is they're actually both from San Diego. So they were up in obviously, the not the hometown, but where I'm currently at. So that was really cool. But dude, they just went like super hard. I mean, like just like banger after banger after banger, and they even released some hidden gems that haven't been released yet, which was awesome. So that was probably my favorite. Janae Aiko, her set was like a spiritually like healing set. Um, I've been a huge fan of Janae Aiko for years now, and she had an amazing set, like hands down, probably one of the best sets I've seen. Just period. Towards the end, she brought out Big Sean, and if you guys know the song "Beware" with Janae Aiko and Big Sean, in my opinion, like that's a classic for those two. So that was dope. And then if I had to pick a third one, it's gonna sound kind of weird, man, but Lil Uzi Vert set was actually pretty fire. Uh, I was like pretty gone by that point, if you know what I mean. But it was a good set. So if I had to pick my top three, those are my top three.
So a little good back of
Yeah,
all genres, I guess. A little bit of
for sure.
EDM, a little bit of
Hip
hip
hop,
hop, R&B, a little bit of crossover.
for sure.
Um, wow. Okay. So was it in that order? Because it goes from crazy to
Yeah,
kind of
I
mellow.
think the reason why I put it in that order was the week following up to Coachella. Work wise and just some personal stuff in my life was just like all over the place. Like the day I was supposed to drive in, this homeless guy actually broke in to like our parking garage, and then he tried to steal like people's like front license plate. So I was like scrambling to excuse me, to like figure that out, and luckily I did. But yeah, it was just like a super hectic week leading up to Coachella. So you know, had to let loose a little bit. So that's probably why I put Isonock at number one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like people tend to go a little bit wild slash crazy day one. I mean, that's
True.
the day you have the most energy.
Mhm. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then that's like what Coachella's 3 days, right?
3 days. Yep, 3
Yeah.
days.
So by the start of day three, you're running on fumes. I mean, all
And that's
three
a that's
day
that's an
festivals.
understatement. Right.
Yeah, you're like running fumes that are running on fumes, so to speak. Just like
For sure.
you're just like just that little bit left, and you just like try to push through for like what another 8 hours. So
Ah, man.
kind of makes sense to listen to something mellow, just kind of finish out the weekend.
Yeah. I guess like last like thoughts around Coachella. It wasn't nearly as packed as previous years. Like maybe it was a lineup, maybe like I don't know, people are just getting tired of festivals, which I don't think is the case, by the way. Um, yeah, it was really not crowded at all. Like I was able to just like really walk around, bathroom lines weren't like obscene. Um, yeah, it was I'll tell you what. If
Any crazy
Coachella,
episode?
Any crazy episodes?
Well, besides what we already talked about, so the music, getting in and out was nice. People try to
Dude,
steal shit. That's usually one of the things that happen. Bathroom lines are crazy. I mean, I'm just giving out examples, but I'm sure you had
no, dude, for sure. I
some
mean,
stuff.
no, it was super chill this year, dude. Like, no issues. Met a bunch of cool people. I didn't personally see any celebrities or famous people like in the crowds, but apparently Billie Eilish was just like chilling during a Lana Del Rey set, like in the crowd, which is cool. But I just didn't happen to see her. Apparently, like Dame Lillard was like chilling in the crowd as well. Again, I didn't see him, but no, it was a good experience, man. I think if Coachella could always be like that chill and just like like that chill, dude, yeah, I'd be there every year. So overall, good experience, man. Good
Would you
experience.
go? Would you go again?
Man, I tell myself every year this is my last Coachella because like every time I go to Coachella, dude, it takes me like a full week to recover, and then like I hate myself for like a week. But then when tickets go on sale, you never know what the lineup's going to be ahead of time for obvious reasons. And so, if the lineup is just full of bangers, then it's just like, yeah, like why wouldn't I want to go? So my answer right now is no, but ask me again in a few months, it'll probably be yes. We'll see.
I
We'll
think
see.
you'll probably say yes in 2 weeks. Let's
Yeah,
be
yeah,
honest.
you're right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. So
So
yeah,
that was a little bit of look into Andrew's life, which is full of festivals and listening to music and having fun.
yes, sir.
He also kind of casually laid out that he lives in San Diego, but we'll cover that in a little bit. So let's jump into the meat of this episode, which is finding out more about you. So similar to last week, I mean, we found a little bit about me, my life. So let's get started with yours. So similar to me, I know bulk of your life you lived in Seattle, but
Hmm.
your journey starts in Alaska. So tell the listeners a little bit about growing up in Alaska. I've never been, so all I know is there's bears. People go cruise to Alaska, which is something my dad
Very
wants to
common,
do.
right?
And it's cold as shit up there.
Dude, don't even get me started on that.
But maybe
But
tell us your experience, something we know, something we don't know, anything that we could find interesting.
for sure. So yeah, born and raised in Alaska. Whenever I ask my parents, how did you end up in Alaska? They don't really have an answer for me. Part of me feels like they thought they were going to LA, but then just ended up in Alaska. You know what I mean? Um,
Well, that's
you know what I'm saying?
I
Like,
mean,
because
that's
back
kind
then, like,
of
like everyone and their mamas was from Korea was trying to go to LA. You know what I mean?
yeah. I mean, that's like throwing up a dart and just missing the whole board. It's not like this much difference. I mean,
Right. Living in Anchorage, Alaska has always been significantly cheaper historically than like living in LA or like New York or some of these larger cities. So I guess like if you're an immigrant trying to move to a brand new country and you don't really have cash like that, kind of makes sense. So that's probably what it came down to. But again, I could not confirm because I don't even think they know. So that's how we ended up there. Now, growing up, there's actually a decent amount of like Asian people. So growing up, all my friends were Filipino, Vietnamese, Korean, um, or like some other ethnicity. And I think that like having gone through that experience, it just gave me an appreciation for like different cultures. Like, dude, my dad owned a pancake and waffle shop or pancake and chicken shop. You know what I mean? So you can only imagine the types of characters that would walk in and out of that place. And yeah, so that's kind of like some of the benefits I got from living in Anchorage and kind of like what made me who I am today. Now on the other side, Alaska's really ghetto. Uh dude, because Anchorage is so small, you can get to anywhere, realistically speaking, in about like 10 minutes. So like if something goes down on the east side of Anchorage and you know, people are trying to like do what they do, realistically speaking, 10 minutes and they're at where you're at. You know what I mean? So you would hear about shit all the time. Like I remember some of the homies that lived on the east side of Anchorage. It was not uncommon for people to get like stabbed or like shot, you know what I mean, in like the school parking lots or getting stabbed like inside the school.
Sorry,
Uh,
is this a high school or middle school?
oh,
Can't be
sorry,
elementary. High school.
sorry.
Okay.
So for context, I did my freshman and sophomore year in Anchorage, and then I moved to Seattle. Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's like fucking weird because like you just wouldn't expect a lot of like gang related violence in somewhere like Anchorage, Alaska. But if you think about it, there's also not that much to do there. So it's kind of like you got to do something to pass the time, right? Um, so in a nutshell, that was kind of my experience living in Anchorage, Alaska. And apparently it's gotten a lot worse. Because if you think about a lot of the industries that brought a lot of like capital, if you will, to Anchorage was like oil, right? And I couldn't really tell you if they really expanded different like sectors for that particular state to bring in more money. Like you have commercial fishing, but that's only over the summer. So outside of the summer, you're not doing much commercial fishing. You know what I mean? And I don't really know like how much like hunting would really bring in terms of like capital to the state. But yeah, like I personally don't think I could ever live there again. And I think I only stay in touch with like one person from Alaska. And everyone else I kind of like lost touch with. So yeah, that was my experience in Alaska, man.
So if I were to go on a cruise,
Yes.
and theoretically I would embark in or disembark in Anchorage.
I would hope so because outside of the state capital is Juneau.
Oh,
You
Juneau.
know,
Yeah,
I've never
makes
even
sense.
been to Juneau. I have no desire to go to Juneau. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yeah.
Okay,
But
so
yeah.
let's say I get off this Anchorage. What are like three things I should do?
So definitely go during the summer. I think if you're like big into nature, like hiking, that kind of stuff, it's pretty ideal. And what's cool about Anchorage in the summer is that the sun doesn't go down until like 4 a.m. Which, thinking about it now, like kind of blows my mind. So nature, hiking, hunting, if you're into that kind of stuff, for sure. My favorite pizza, believe it or not, is still in Anchorage. It's a spot called Moose's Tooth. And dude, I couldn't tell you like what it is about this particular pizza, but whenever my aunt or the homie like comes to visit, like they will bring me boxes of frozen pizza and it's top tier. So if you're ever in Anchorage, no matter the season, Moose's Tooth Pizza. And I couldn't drink when I was in Anchorage, but apparently like their brewery is pretty fire too. So that's number two. Number three, man. I had to pick a third. Dude, I couldn't even give you a third. Like, I literally couldn't even give you a third.
So
Those are the two.
basically, disembark, get some
Yes.
pizza,
100%.
and beer. Go outside and come back.
Dude, yeah, I mean, bro.
Or in some cases, go to the east side and then never come back.
Yeah, all right, so there's a very particular area of Anchorage. It's called Fairview. And dude, like I don't think you pay me to go there at certain parts of the day just because like to your point, like I just might not come back. And I don't have a lot of confidence that it's gotten better over the years. If anything, I would put my money on the fact that it probably got worse over the years. You know what I mean? There was another area growing up. It was called Mountain View. Mountain View was also like super just like not good. Um, yeah, it's like we're oddly enough, like just a lot of gang violence. And I really couldn't tell you where it stems from. Maybe at some point I'll have the homie give us a detailed breakdown on the history of gang violence in Anchorage, Alaska. But yeah, dude, that's it.
So
outdoorsy
Mountain
stuff and pizza.
so Mountain View, not to be confused with Mountain View in California.
No. That's very different.
Yeah,
Oh
I mean
man,
Fairview, Mountain View. I don't know what these views are doing, but I guess it's
it's not great.
yeah, it's
Tell you
not
that.
great.
Tell you that, brother.
So you start in Alaska and your family moves to Seattle. You said what,
Yes.
sophomore year in high school? Somewhere
Yeah, going
around
into
there.
my junior year. So this is
So
2008, 2009. Yeah.
2008, 2009. So I'm guessing the motivations from like the dangers of ghetto and just like limited opportunities.
Yeah, and
Or your dad
then
just said, "F it, we're getting out of here."
yeah, dude. Actually, they didn't tell me back then, which which I think I actually appreciate them for not telling me this. But if you remember what happened in 2008, that was the big financial crisis,
Oh yeah, that's right.
right? And my dad was in finance, so his firm went under, and he had some connections that moved out to Seattle.
Oh,
And
I thought you were saying I thought you were gonna say he has some bad connection and you
oh
guys are
no,
running away.
no, dude. If you ever see my dad, he looks like just like standard old Asian dude, like would
By the
never
way,
fly.
I have met Andrew's dad. Very unassuming guy.
Yeah,
He could secretly be a mafia boss that's on the run, but
man. If he
at
is,
least for
no,
my interaction, I didn't get the sense.
no, he's a super chill dude. He just plays golf and you know watches football. So super chill dude. But yeah, so that's actually, from my understanding, was one of the catalysts for us to actually move to Seattle. And on top of that, to your point, like, dude, there's no opportunity there. Like the college, like the one college in Anchorage, like you don't apply, like you just go. you know,
Is it
uh,
University of Alaska?
yeah, like Anchorage, Alaska. Yeah,
Oh, okay. I mean, that was a guess, but I mean, if
you
there's
know
only one school, it's probably gonna be a public school or a state
exactly.
school. Yeah.
Um, I don't know why they really wanted me to go to UW, but then also like getting like the in-state tuition, I think was a big thing for them as well, which we'll get to later. But yeah, in a nutshell, that is how my family and I ended up in Seattle, Washington.
So you moved to Issaquah, which is an eastern suburb of Seattle.
Correct.
Finished the rest of high school there. What were the differences? I mean,
Oh,
it sounds
dude.
like you split your high school in half between Alaska and the Seattle area.
Yeah. So the high school I went to in Anchorage was definitely on the safer end, like no questions asked. Um, it definitely was on the side of town where people were a bit more wealthier, for sure. But like I mentioned before, because everything is so close, it's like you had all sorts of characters running up in that school. You know what I mean? And so when I moved to Issaquah, Washington, it was kind of a trip because like cats were pulling up in like Beamers, came from money. Like, dude, I went to high school with Brian Oslavsky's daughter, who is the CFO of Amazon. Like all sorts of people like that. You know what I mean? And like I just wasn't used to like being immersed in that kind of environment. Like everyone was just kind of balling for the most part. And so to go from Anchorage, where it's just like people try to bang on you like every other second, to people who are sea level at Amazon, right? Or their fathers are at sea level at Amazon. Dude, it was hard for me to adjust. We'll just put it that way. Um, like I remember when I pulled up to tennis tryouts, like I had like the long and one like basketball shorts, like a baggy tee. And people like couldn't figure out like what I was trying to say. They're like, dude, who the hell is this guy? But again, like that's just it's because that's how I grew up. You know what I mean? So it was definitely a trip for sure.
But I mean, that experience, I bet, built your character. You know, in the long run, you kind of got a lot to learn from living in both places and the shock, the cultural differences between the two.
Yeah. I mean, to this day, that's probably one of the things I'm the most like grateful for. Is just like getting me out of that environment, because if they didn't, dude, I probably wouldn't be sitting here like doing this podcast with you today. You know what I mean? And back then, I just like couldn't like wrap my head around it as to like why they wanted to obviously get to Washington. Yeah, 2008 happened, so like that's one thing. But you know, they always wanted to put me and my brother first, and I think had they not done that, yeah, dude, I can only imagine what would have happened if I stayed in Anchorage, Alaska. You know what I'm saying? So shout
Yeah,
out
I
to them.
think I think we both kind of have the same experience there, where moving to a different place, well, different state for you, different country for me.
Mhm.
But I mean, either way, first you question why they do it. Because you're younger, they don't really tell you the reason. You
Right.
kind of have to go by what they do. They put food on your table, roof over your head. And then as the years go by, you kind of figure out, you know, like you said,
So
had
thankful
they
at the end of
not
the
done
month.
it,
Dude,
we wouldn't be here. There would be no double Oppa. There will be zero Oppas.
1000%, bro. Oppas wouldn't exist. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
Like, goddamn.
So shout out
Jesus.
to our parents.
For sure.
So you said that they wanted you to go to University of Washington or UW. So that was like the next phase of your life. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, it seems like the term is really short, right? You moved to Seattle, and then within 2 years, you're off to college.
Yeah. So that was the other thing too. It's like I was constantly having to adjust because these were such short like time periods in my life, right?
Hmm.
Um when I got to UW, it was kind of refreshing in a way because there was so much like cultural diversity that it reminded me a lot of Anchorage. So when I got to UW, I just felt like I could be a lot more of just myself because when the 2 years I did at Issaquah High, I didn't have like the greatest time like adjusting. There was a lot of people there that like were just really kind of like stuck up, very like just condescending because like they come for money or you know typical rich high school type of vibe. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so when I got to UW, it was like the exact opposite of that. And so I had a much easier time adapting at UW, and I think that's really when like things started like looking up for me in a way. Uh, yeah, UW, very good time. I barely graduated college just because like dude, I just like I had such terrible study habits. Like I wasn't disciplined. Uh I was just more focused on chasing all the honeys and you know, just where was the next party, like, you know, typical college stuff. And so I thought I wanted to pre-med. First like semester, just I was like, this is not for me. Like, forget it. And then, you know, you think about it where it's like, I don't want to be like, you know, hundreds of $1,000s in debt. I don't want to be in school for, you know, like 15, 16 years, considering I barely graduated college. Like, good luck with that. You know what I mean? And then the next logical option for me was business. And I started to get my shit together. And when I applied to the school, I had pretty good stats. Like on the writing assessment, I scored like a 4.25 out of 5. I have like a 3.6 GPA. I felt like I wrote a very good essay.
Oh, entrance, whatever.
Right. And then just rejected. And I was like, oh my God, like, what am I going to do? And then, you know, I was talking to my dad and he was like, hey, man, if you want to like do a 5th or 6th year just to figure out like what you want to pursue, like, I'll support you. But in my mind, I was like, dude, that sounds terrible. Like, I'm just trying to graduate on time. And then it was communications was like my final option. Obviously got into communications. And you know, I'll tell you right now, I think some of the best people that I met at UW were actually in communications. Um, there was a lot of like athletes, so people from the football team, soccer team, just you name it. A lot of them were in communications, and it kind of makes sense. It's like you're trying to make it to the league, so you're not trying to like pick some like incredibly difficult major and not be able to like you know divide up your time. And then I made a lot of friends in the Greek community, and that was interesting. Like I had this job at the UW call center, and basically this job is you're just calling alumni and asking for donations. And yeah, dude, like I remember we used to like walk in to work after just like ripping a bunch of shots and just like doing our jobs. Um and
Well,
dude, it
nothing
was
like alcohol to let you lose a little bit on those cold calls, right?
Yeah. So just like
Pick
kind of
up
like,
the phone and start dialing.
hello, Mr. Smith. Would you like to donate to? No. And then you just get hung up on a bunch of times. It's like, dude, it was so crazy. And everyone in that call center was in a Greek house of some sort. So everyone was kind of on the same page. And like, yeah, it was such an amazing time. And that's kind of how I got introduced to Young, actually, is I ended up in a house with a bunch of his younger fraternity brothers. And at that point, I'm familiar with Greek, how it operates and whatever, whatever. So I'm in this house and like, oh, hey, which house is yours? And they're like, oh, it's actually like off what they call Greek Row at UW. And then they start explaining like the concept of like Asian Greek to me. But all that like didn't mean anything to me. I was like, oh, like if you guys are trying to like rage face, like, yo, let me know. You know what I mean? Um, but then obviously got cool with a lot of Young's fraternity brothers. Some of them are still like some of my closest friends today. And yeah, so in a nutshell, that was kind of my college experience in, I think it was like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, UW, those of you who don't know, University of Washington has a pretty strong medical school
For
and
sure.
pretty strong business school.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was referring to about the whole essays and writing score. So the business school has a separate entrance entrance process. Yeah, so where it looks at your GPA. So I think you're supposed to apply after your freshman year or something like that. I can't remember.
Right.
I How do I know this? I also tried for business school. As one of the earlier interests, but basically you gotta like write an essay, you gotta do some writing classes, you get scored on it, there's a GPA component. So that's what he was referring to. So
Right.
pretty rigorous process. So I mean, understandably, it's not the end of the world if you don't make it, but looks like you found your calling there. Calm. You met a lot of athletes, which, by the way, a lot of people tend to trash the athletes a little bit for
Right.
there's like that one famous quote from a college quarterback talking about he's not here to play school or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
there tends to be some like some prejudice against or bias against athletes and whether they attend class or they're smart. But I've met a lot of smart athletes, so
Oh, for
I
sure.
think they come in batches just like the rest of the population in college. So sounds like it's trending up. Alaska, high school, college. So then tell us a little bit about after that. So you
Dude,
presumably graduate with the comm degree. And
just
then from
barely.
my
Just
understanding,
barely.
yeah, okay. Well, regardless, you get through. And then I believe your first job is a professional recruiter. So tell us a little bit about that.
Dude, okay. So I won't say the name of the firm because I just had such a negative experience. But throughout my college tenure, I studied finance on the side. And I have a couple of friends that went into investment banking. And I thought that's what I wanted to do because at that point in time, all I was thinking about was, holy hell, like, how am I going to make money to just like support myself? Like, I don't want to have to move back home. Like, I don't want to have my parents like support me, all the things. And as graduation was coming up, like, I just felt this inherent pressure that, oh my God, what am I doing with my life? Like, what does the next 5 years of my life look like? I'm broke. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, what am I going to do? So I got an interview for I think the firm was trying to open up like this boutique investment banking branch focused on like very, very specific industries. And when I was going through the interview process, for the most part, everyone was very, very rude and condescending. Like I remember the second round of the interview, there was three dudes in a room and just I was getting grilled left and right. And it got to the point where one of the guys literally just started like asking me kind of like asshole type questions, like, "Oh, like, are you good at soccer?" Like, just shit like that. And I actually ended up getting an offer, but around that same time, this large tech company reached out and was like, "Hey, we looked at your resume, and what do you think about becoming a recruiter?" And I thought it was like a scam call because I was like, dude, did you even look at my resume? You know? And then she was like, "No, no, no, no. It's this program that we have for people that have been out of college for a year. Like we take you in, we train you up to be a senior recruiter, and then you're on your way." And in the back of my mind, I knew I always wanted to be in tech, and I just kind of saw it as an opportunity to do exactly just that. And then really thinking about it, I was like, if I have to work with these people that just interviewed me, like I would rather drink bleach because like these people are just so rude and condescending. And I was like, that is absolutely not who I envisioned becoming in the future. So took that offer with the big tech company, and yeah, the rest is history.
So, kind of looking back, right? And then we can talk about like, I guess in fact we should just talk about it right now because that's
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of what comes next. So at some point, you're a successful recruiter, at least from my perspective, anyways. And then you get to a current role, which is more of a technical role in IT. So huge change, recruiter to an IT engineer, solutions architect. So tell us about that, because I can't imagine that being easy at all. Kind of a pivoting.
Yeah, dude. So I was getting really burned out in recruiting, and I'm always like a forward thinker. So while obviously having a 5-year plan is good to have in the back of your mind, I think it's also realistic to understand that that 5-year plan is going to change drastically all the time. And I really wanted to like do something in my career that like was one interesting, but also gave me like a sense of purpose. And so while I was in recruiting, I only recruited for the same job family for the most part, which was solutions architecture. And along the way, I recruited this guy who is still my mentor today. And I think if it wasn't for him, um, I don't know if I would have been able to make the transition. Because when I was trying to like network, learn, and just like figure out a path forward, there was a lot of like gatekeeping. And I hated that. Like, I wasn't coming in and being like, oh, like, I recruited all these people and now all of a sudden I think I can do this. Like, it wasn't that at all. It was like, hey, like, the more I learn about this profession and the more I learn about how influential the tech can be on just the way we live life, I was like, yeah, this like definitely sounds like something that could be meaningful to me. And I love talking to people. So it was kind of like that good blend of like having like soft skills, but also being very close to the tech. And this particular mentor, who I will convince to come on this podcast at some point, uh, yeah, he really kept pushing me. And at that time, he was really the only one that believed that I could actually pull it off. Because, dude, some people, knowing what I know now, I think they almost felt like threatened. You know what I mean? And what I mean by that is like, oh, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. Like, why all of a sudden should I let this like random recruiter join the realms of what I do? But, to me, like, I never thought, even to this day, think that's the right way to think about it. I think we should be able to provide opportunities for people to make career changes, assuming that they're taking it seriously, obviously. And so in 2019, our former manager actually reached out to me randomly, literally in the most casual way possible. And I'll remember this ping for the rest of my life. The ping was literally, "Hey man, you ready?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Yeah, we have an open role, and you have basically been interviewing with us for the last like 3 years. So if you want it, it's yours. But I need you to start next week." And I was like, no questions asked. I immediately pinged my manager at the time. I was like, "Hey man, I'm taking this offer. Let me know what you need in the meantime, but I'm gone next week." And that in itself has been the most like life changing career transition that I've made up to this point in my life. Just like the amount of people I've met, just the things I've learned, both like personal life lessons and professional lessons. Like, dude, I would not change a thing about the way I transitioned. And then also shout out to my mentor, man. I think that guy was a big part of kind of how I got to where I am today. Like I still talk to him today. Like I'll still ask him random questions, and we'll still go to like baseball games and stuff. So I think the big part of that again is having mentors that actually believe in you
And now here you are,
on this podcast.
on this podcast in the, well, hopefully, I don't know what the weather's like today, but the warm, sunny day in San Diego,
Hey, you know,
where you have found success. It sounds like you've surrounded yourself with successful people, your mentor,
for
our old
sure.
manager, me. I'll put myself in there.
Even if you didn't.
And many others you've met and that have touched you to your success. I'm sure they have shared like values and morals and goals and
Oh, dude, absolutely.
perspective on life. Uh, what because we are on this podcast to give people life advice, even though they may not have asked us.
Hmm.
Give us a little bit of advice, I guess. Let's start with people that are in a similar boat, people that are kind of burned out, maybe thinking about a career change or, doing something else. Doesn't necessarily have to be, to tech or IT, because I think a lot of these are transferable skills anyways, but
1000%, man.
maybe a device or two that you can give to people that are looking for a change.
I think the first thing, obviously, depending on the change you're trying to make, this is or can be a very, very difficult process. Like there's gonna be days that you want to quit. Especially after getting like rejection letter after rejection letter. It can also be a very like lonely process depending on the career path that you're trying to jump to. Like when I was doing it, like, dude, outside of maybe my mentor, and it's not like I talked to him every day. Uh, it was very much so all me, like spending weekends, late nights, not going to certain social events just to make sure like, I was doing what I needed to do to make that jump. Um, yeah, I mean, it's hard for sure. And it definitely puts an emotional and mental burden on you. But when you finally make that jump, like you just kind of look back and you just realize like all the work and effort you put in is all made it all worth it. Um, and so if you're listening to this podcast and you're in that position, I would encourage you to keep going because once you make it past that hump and get to where you want to get, you'll thank yourself 1,000 times over for not quitting. Because I think the misconception with a lot of people I've talked to, even recently, like this year, that have considered career changes, is they don't necessarily realize the amount of work and how difficult it is to actually do so. And dude, there's been a lot of people I have talked to where after talking to me, they're like, you know what? I'm not at a point in my life where I'm ready to put in that commitment, right? Which is totally fine. But all to say, if you feel like it's worth it and you feel like it's gonna bring meaning and value to your life, like keep going. No one said this stuff was gonna be easy. So that'd be number one. I have two
Okay.
more.
Oh, yeah, two more. Okay. Go ahead.
Two, well, that's related to like the career stuff. Number two is I think sometimes we get so hyper focused on the end goal or the outcome that we don't necessarily take the time to appreciate what we're doing in the present moment. And that's actually where I think I was reading up on this last week. That's where like anxiety stems from. Like people that are very anxious people, they're very focused and fixated on future outcomes. But the reality of it is you can't control the future. And trying to worry about something that hasn't necessarily happened yet doesn't do anyone any good. And so if you can change your focus and your mindset to say, hey, like, what can I do right now? Or what can I focus on right now to provide a potential better outcome for what I'm looking to do? I think that will also take off a lot of like mental burden and stress on you. Because that was my problem when I was doing this was if something didn't go right or if a door was shut on me, I would start thinking to myself like, holy shit, man, like is it over? Like what, like I've been putting all this work like for what? But that's not good. Don't think like that because that doesn't help anybody. Just focus on what you can do right now and optimizing what you can do at your disposal. And I will almost guarantee you that you will have a much smoother process than I did. And the last one I kind of already talked about was, and I get it's kind of difficult in this day and age, but if you can find a mentor that actually like believes in you and will pick up your calls at like 2 or 3 in the morning, um, or just really be there for you when you really need it. Like that is everything, in my opinion. And that's probably the reason why I take mentorship so personally and seriously now, is because the impact that my mentor had on me, even just thinking to where I've got to in my career and in my life, like I don't think I would have been able to do that without him. Um, and because I think the problem with mentorship now, it's especially at where me and Young currently work, it almost feels like a checkbox. Like, oh, like I want to get promoted, so I need to mentor, you know, X number of people. Or some people even use it as like a way to like stroke their ego, which I don't think is right. Like I think you should mentor people because you actually give a shit. So and to this day, like I mentioned before, like I still talk to and hang out with my mentor. Like I call him my mentor, but I think at this point I can just call him like a really close friend. Um, so yeah, those would be my 3 pieces of advice for people that are trying to make a career change.
No, I think these are all great point. I mean, you gave a lot of people credit, but I think one thing you didn't do is give yourself credit because I mean, you kind of laid it out. It's difficult. It's lonely.
For
Sometimes
sure.
things don't go your way, and then you start having doubts or anxiety. There's that term imposter syndrome. That
Oh,
doesn't really
100%.
apply here, but I mean,
Right.
even when you're working, you always think to yourself, are you good enough
Absolutely.
for yourself working with these people around you that may be a lot better than you as it seems. So people have confidence issues and things like that.
For sure.
And finding people that can kind of validate who you are or your worthiness is great. Yeah, really in all facets of life.
1000%.
I have one more question.
For sure.
So giving life advice, I know you just gave life advice to people that are motivated to make a career change. What about because looks like you've moved around a lot and significantly recently too? Because I mean, you were living in Seattle for a while, and now you're in San Diego. So, any advice you can give for people that are moving to a new city for whatever reason?
Yeah, so I'll answer this in 2 parts. So the first part is I think everyone should get out of their home city at some point. I think the amount that you'll learn about yourself and the amount that you'll grow by putting yourself in an environment or situation that you're not familiar with, like, dude, there's no amount of money that you could put to give yourself that same level of experience. So definitely do that. Also, I have never talked to anyone that said I don't like San Diego. Nobody. So like in fairness, like San Diego's a dope city. Um, but I think the second part that I'll answer to that question is just having an open mindset. I think in life there's just so many different possibilities and opportunities that we're not even familiar with. I mean, like even look at technology. Like, dude, we're literally using things like ChatGPT to like help us live our lives. Like 10 years ago, dude, I didn't even think that was a thing. Like we have self-driving cars, but all those things became possible because there was one or a group of people that took the time to actually make that a reality. You know what I mean? And they can't do that unless they actually put themselves in situations that will kind of push them to that outcome. So yeah. And honestly, dude, if you move to a new city and you don't know anybody, you're kind of forcing yourself to like do exactly those things, to trying different things, like meeting new people, picking up new hobbies. You know what I mean? So for that reason, I would encourage anyone that hasn't done it yet, go live in a new city.
Preferable,
Because this is my third one. So yeah.
preferably San Diego from the sound
Hey
of it.
man, for sure.
Yeah, I think I just live in a hotter version without an ocean here in Austin, but
For sure.
either way, I think we can wrap this one up. Again, if you are just joining us, we're actually ending the podcast, but in summary, we went through we went through Andrew's life. He's a huge avid listener of music and festival goer, so we talked a little bit about his experience with his fourth Coachella. I guess supposedly there's more to follow
See.
next year and the year after. We'll see. We'll ask him in about a month how he feels about going back to Coachella. But other than that, we talked about his life in Alaska, taking him into Seattle through his college, and then ending up as a solutions architect, living in the sunny, beautiful town of San Diego,
Yes, sir.
playing golf seemingly every day. I can't confirm, but
I
he
cannot
seems
confirm
to
or
be.
deny those statements.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we got to learn a little bit about Andrew, and then he gave us a lot of good advice to people that are kind of motivated to do what he did, move to a different city, and also like making a career and change. So I think we can call this one good. Um, so if you are still listening, thanks for listening in. This is the Double O podcast. Your host, Young and Andrew. We will be back next week. Finally, after we spend a couple weeks talking about ourselves, we are going to spend a good deal of time talking about one of our most favorite topics, I guess. Um, we are avid sports fan, music culture fan, so we'll be talking about some of those and a very recent development in the music industry. So with that, thanks again for listening to us, and until next time,
We out. Peace.
peace.